Berlin. Frank Hansel is a German MP with the right-wing AfD party. And Matthew Karnitschnig is Politico's chief Europe correspondent. Thanks so much for joining us, gentlemen. Matthew, let me start with you. Before we talk about what this means for the country and the political trends, what does AKK taking over from Merkel mean for the ruling coalition and the CDU?
Well, I think in the immediate term for the ruling coalition, it means that they can continue on as they have done. It should quiet down some of the noise that we've heard in the CDU recently, especially after those elections that you mentioned. But otherwise, it should allow this coalition to continue along with its agenda, at least until the European elections, which is the next big test, and they're coming up in May. So I think that you'll see some stability for the coming months, and then we'll see what happens at that European election, and that could throw everything into doubt again.
Frank Hansel, one of the primary focuses of what you guys do is that you were anti-Merkel. Merkel must go was your slogan. So now do you have a bit of a conundrum because Merkel's essentially gone? What are you going to do now?
Well, it's really a good political sign that the era of Mrs. Merkel is over. We have to see what her successor is doing, but I coincide completely with what you said before, that there is a range within the next half year where there's still certain stability within German politics, but we have to see that it's not only the European election which we have in May, but also 3 elections in 3 German states, like especially Saxony and in Thuringia, where we are in front, where AfD is in front of CDU. And this together with the failure of the Christian Democrats in the European election will make another step for probably new elections or a completely redesign of German policy.
For many people across the continent, Frank, the fact that people who used to vote for parties within Merkel's coalition turned right towards you is a travesty. It's scary. It brings back echoes of the past with xenophobia, anti-immigration, racism, right? Do you take the credit for them losing power?
Well, first of all, I always say, and restate it again here, we are not anti-migration. We do know for demographic reason in the whole of Europe that we need migration, but it's got to be organized and it's got to be legal. First, we are not against refugees. We know there are problems in the world and we have to take some of them, but it must be on a legal basis. That's the first to say. The other thing is that the elites, the former elites, are really have come to an end. And you see this in Spain, where a new party also is rising. And you see it with the decline of the Social Democrats. We are in a turning point, and it doesn't make sense always to claim that the new parties are all extremists or right-wing. We are just filling a representation lack of the former elites. That's all.
Matthew, there was a more conservative candidate, Friedrich Merz. Tell me what it means that Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, AKK, was actually the chosen successor, and she made it as the head of the party rather than him. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us that the CDU, despite all of the problems that it's had recently, really wants to continue with the status quo, more or less. They don't want to take any big risks, and I think that Merz would have been a riskier strategy for the party because he would have moved the party to the right. He vowed to try and cut in half the support for the AfD by taking a more conservative position on migration, on some fiscal issues, for example, taxes and that type of thing, which would be very controversial. And he might have succeeded in winning back some people from the right who have left the CDU recently. But the risk was that he would lose some of the coalition that Merkel has put together in recent years by bringing on voters from the Greens and from the SPD, people who might be a little bit more liberal in their views. And I think this was sort of the choice ultimately that the party delegates had to make on Friday was, are they better off continuing the course now with a new leader, a new face, not Merkel, but some policies close to what Merkel represents and trying to maintain this coalition? Or are they going to try and really sharpen their conservative profile to go back to kind of the old CDU, which was a bit more conservative. And so I think this tells us that they've really tried to play it safe here for now. But we'll see if this works. I mean, you know, as we heard, in the coming months, you've got a number of elections. You've got these elections in Eastern Germany too, which are very important, where the AfD stands a chance to actually win a couple of these states, which for the establishment parties would be an absolute disaster. So I think we really have to keep a close eye on AKK and whether she can bring this party together now, because it's still very divided.
Yes. So, Frank, given that they decided to go with the status quo and they played it safe, as Matthew says, is that more of an opportunity for you? Because they're easier to attack from the right, aren't they?
Yes, but the analysis of Matthew is exactly what we think, what's true. I think, on the other hand, that Mr. Merz probably was merely a projection of the voters to more conservatism. We have to see that the CDU in the last 15 years has completely changed. The membership has changed, so it would have been very doubtful, and that's where he is correct. It was a risk to have voted for him as president of the CDU, because he would have to prove that he really can transform the CDU again to a conservative or new conservative party. Since this is not going to happen anymore, this is, of course, what we always state, the representation lack of the center-right. It's not be fulfilled by Mrs. Kramp-Karrenbauer, probably. It's, at least the electorate of Germany will think that it's Merkel II, Merkel II. And this really makes it a lot easier for us. And we are looking forward to what's going to happen in the next months and the following year.
And Matthew, as Chancellor, is all of this going to take the pressure off Merkel ahead of the next federal elections in October 2021? Is that question mark over her future put aside?
Yes, I think so, because we have to see that the Social Democrats have put in the contract, in the political contract of their coalition, that in the half term they want to rethink the whole achievement till then. And it's very probable that the Social Democrats might leave the coalition and we go into new elections. And this is then definitely the end of Merkel.
Okay,
that's
interesting. So, okay. So that's what Frank says. So he says we might go to new elections. What do you think, Matthew? Because others see the fact that Merkel has chosen a continuity candidate for the next couple of years. It means that perhaps she's safe as Chancellor until the federal elections.
Well, I think what people are going to start asking now is how long will Merkel remain Chancellor until she decides to transition to Kramp-Karrenbauer, possibly stepping aside before the next election to give Kramp-Karrenbauer the opportunity to show that she can run the government for a time at least before the new election. And so those doubts haven't really disappeared. There are also all of these pressures on the Social Democrats, and they might decide at some point it's not in our interest to remain in this coalition, as Frank just said. So, you know, there are still a lot of question marks hanging over Merkel's chancellorship, but at least for now, I think that she's resolved the immediate issues, the immediate pressures that she was facing. And I think that she's going to continue to try and leave her mark on the international stage, as we've seen over the past several days, with her going to Marrakesh, for example, and accentuating again all of the European issues and that type of thing. So I think we're going to see Merkel focusing more on international issues and leaving some of the domestic issues to Kramp-Karrenbauer and to others in her government.
Frank, is the German political future for the likes of you, the AfD, and for the Greens on the other end of this political spectrum, and is everybody else in the middle perhaps on fragile ground?
I think so. I think the new red is green and the new black is blue. We are actually the two contrahands in the future policy. We see, for instance, that the Greens want to destroy the German car industry. They are putting the climate change onto the front top agenda. Nobody can pay this whole energy change they are doing with their policies. I think people will realize that the hype the Greens actually have due to the lack of convincement of the Social Democrats they will fall into a deep hole, and I think then it's open for us, for the AfD. But I state that we also, in our own party, we have to do some homework. We have to convince the electorate that we are a center-right party, that we stand for the future for Germany, that we stand for the future of a free Europe, of free nations, and that all those elements that the leading parties for the moment saying that we are this or we are that, we are anti-that, we're anti-that, it's not true. That we can convince from the bottom of our hearts the people that we are the new political party that they can trust.
But Frank, your leaders have not made it easy for yourselves, right? With comments about Holocaust remembrance and the Nazis in the past, and you have had members you've had to kick out who are neo-Nazis, right?
That's
so it's not as if you've made it easy for yourselves.
No, first they're not neo-Nazis. They are said to be from the current elite. But we have certain problems, and that's what I'm saying. And I state this as a self-criticism. We have to do our homeworks in order to convince the electorate that we are a political party you can trust in. We have nothing to do with the German past. We want a good, safe, and constructive German future. That's all. We want to make Germany fit for the future, holding our industry structure, holding our welfare state, which will collapse if we have illegal mass migration. Right. These are our points, and they are nothing to debate on this. We are a good party and good for Germany.
Well, around 15% of the German voting population agrees with you, and that's what makes it fascinating for those of us from the outside looking in. Fascinating political times in Germany. Gentlemen, Matthew Karnitschnig and Frank Hansel. I've got to move on, but I thank you very much for joining us.